11:45, the president came out and announced executive action pertaining to gun reform. What was your initial reaction without really being able to dig into this so far?
Well, I did watch. I had some meetings, so I saw some of the president's press conference, and I've read some other things. And the thing that we need to focus on is we need to focus on not the instrument a person uses, but their actions. And that's really where I think we can find the common ground to really hold the people accountable that don't behave properly and not punish those that do.
When we talk about, because there were two things that stood out to me, it was a stabilizing unit for a rifle and or a pistol and what that would look like, how they would regulate that, allowing people or forcing people to get a federal license, and then looking at any type of red flag suggestions or legislation. They have a model that they're going to hand out to the states. What's your reaction to those two things? Because I don't think any of us disagree that we would like to see more action taken to prevent the proliferation of ghost guns. So I think we're more focused on the other two parts of this. I mean, you care to discuss those at all?
Well, again, what they're getting us down to is they're getting us down to talking about the instrument that a person uses. And it's really tragic when everybody wants to hurt another individual. And individuals that want to harm another person for whatever reason, I can't imagine why, they're gonna find a way to do it. So we need to figure out how we deal with that behavior, and not, I'll say it again, and not be focused on the instrument they're going to use to inflict that harm on other individuals. And, we can talk about many different things, but till we get to the root cause of the issue, people are still gonna, and it's unfortunate, it's gonna happen. So we need to do whatever we can to enforce the laws we have now. And we need to take a look at how we address people that don't behave properly, rather than lumping all the law-abiding gun owners in with those who do not follow the law.
What do you think is the root problem? How would you address it through legislative means?
Well, there's a couple things that we have to look at, okay? And I know the president talks about the Charleston loophole. None of the legislation that they talked about would have fixed that. That had to do with somebody not reporting to one of the agencies, okay? So that's really the issue there. We have background checks. So when you look at the legislation that's been put forward, I know the president said that it should be enacted, but we have background checks. And we have those, they work. Unfortunately, they're only as good as the people that are putting the information into them. So we need to make sure that happens. That accountability needs to be there. But, one of the things, one of the bills, when you're talking about the waiting period, would have allowed the FBI and others to delay a law-abiding citizen from getting a gun indefinitely. And we're talking about law-abiding citizens. And we also talk about, assault weapons. Anything that a person uses to inflict harm upon another, any instrument, becomes an assault weapon. And that's really, again, it comes back to the actions of the individual. And if there are people that shouldn't have guns, you're not going to get any argument from anyone that they shouldn't be allowed to have it. But we should not be abridging the rights of law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, Senator Toomey talked about how, he wasn't a big fan of kind of a go-it-alone approach through executive action. He'd like to see a more legislative means. And he seemed open to the idea of background checks. Is that kind of what you're suggesting is, there is a way to expand it, there is a way to do this differently that would prevent, I guess in some cases, because in some cases we just don't really know a person, right? But in some cases to prevent these individuals from getting firearms?
Well, and some of the legislation that was passed through the House would have not given people their day in court, which is another one of our foundational rights in our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. So is being able to keep and bear arms. So when we look about the discussion, and I'm a little frustrated too that the president is going about this single-handedly and not doing what he should be doing which is enforcing our laws and making sure that all our laws are followed. So when you look at what's happening, we need to get past the rhetoric and talking about assault weapons and everything else. I would like somebody for them to define to me what an assault weapon is. And I haven't, it's, they talked about high capacity magazines. They talked about many things, but really what we need to focus on is the actions of the individual and making sure they're held accountable, and that the gun, that no weapon that can inflict harm upon another gets into the hands of somebody who wants to do something bad with it. And that can be a knife, that can be a gun, that can be an automobile.
Right.
I mean, so we certainly, and they also talked about the president said that gun manufacturers are the only people that can't be sued. Well, here's what I would say. If somebody takes that instrument and inflicts harm upon another person, I mean, we don't want auto manufacturers to be sued if somebody kills another person with a vehicle. It certainly is not the auto manufacturer's fault that somebody took that vehicle and did something bad with it. It goes back to what's the actions of the individual, and how do we make sure we get to the root cause of finding that out. I'm willing to have that discussion.
Got it. As far as I think a lot of this has to do with the prevention of mass shootings. I think you and I both agree sometimes there's just no way to see someone's heart. And I think most of us Pennsylvanians are pretty moderate, and we like to see kind of the full spectrum, both sides of things. But there's no way to explain why people do this and why people hurt people like this. And the one thing that people come back to me with all the time is that the firearms in some of these cases make it easier to inflict damage quicker. Have you given any thought to that? And if there would, because there's really, like I said, there's no way to know what's going through someone's mind. Someone may be perfectly stable one week and the next week things change. Is there really any way to take care of this in a bipartisan fashion?
Well, without getting, and here's what needs to happen. We need to get past the political talking points on this and talking about the instrument and talk about the actions. And that's how you get there. And limiting an individual's constitutional rights that is a law-abiding citizen is not going to get you there. It's not going to get you there by limiting the rights guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution and in the Pennsylvania Constitution. Because in Pennsylvania, Article 1, Section 21 says the citizen's right to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state shall not be questioned. Shall not be questioned.
Yeah. How do we prevent someone from just killing 18 people one day, though? Just waking up and saying, today's the day.
Well, that's the discussion we need to have. Why is that happening?
No, no offense, Con, but haven't we been having that discussion in some context? Do you feel like it's not happening in DC?
I think it's not happening. You're not getting everybody to the table because they're all talking about their talking points. And you're not getting everybody in a discussion, quite frankly.
Yeah. Do you feel like your side of things, your perspective hasn't been heard in DC?
Well, I've always said this, and I worked on things in Harrisburg, and I always said that every right has a responsibility, and when people display that they're not responsible, and when that's been determined by their actions, then they're the ones that lose the rights. But you don't, certainly in our democracy, in our republic, you don't take the rights away of law-abiding citizens.